What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Wake and Jake College Football Show. This is going to be your national championship preview. I do know a few weeks, whatever ago, I did mention that I was going to do a season review for the conferences and that would start with the national championship preview and then also continue on to the review. But it's the national championship game. I'm going to put some respect on the national championship. This is what every team has been working towards. This is what we've all been waiting for since the beginning of the season. So the review, preview, whatever you want to call it, they're all getting their own episodes, and then we'll get into conference, recaps and transfer portal and all that stuff. But national championship, it deserves its own episode, so we're going to do that. And I mentioned transfer portal again, not touching on the transfer portal until Ohio State and Notre Dame were at least 5 days past the national championship game, because that's when all those players have to officially be entered into the portal. So, that being said, let's get a little high and preview the national championship game. All right, national championship preview. Final game of the college football season. Bittersweet. It's exciting because it's the national championship game again. This is what we've been waiting for all year. Sucks though, because this is the last college football game of this season, not of 2025, but of this season. And then we've got a long ass wait until it starts up again. Ohio State, Notre Dame. I think a lot of people had Ohio State playing in this game preseason. I know I did. I don't know how many people actually had Notre Dame in this game. I know I did not. I don't even know if I had Notre Dame making the playoffs. I can actually pull that up real quick. But I know I had Ohio State losing to Georgia, which didn't really work out. I did not have Notre Dame making the playoffs. I think I had them finishing with 2 losses. And I just didn't have them making the playoffs. And, well, they proved me wrong. Week after week, they proved me wrong. Kind of giving me those Ole Miss vibes from last year, where quite a few times I was like, all right, this is the week they lose. There's no way Notre Dame goes the whole season with just 1 loss, and they went the whole season with just 1 loss. So here we are. Ohio State, Notre Dame. Ohio State, 8.5-point favorite. We'll just do a quick recap of each team, of their seasons. Notre Dame, 14-1 this year. And that 1 loss is just probably the ugliest loss for any playoff team. Northern Illinois, a MAC team, you lost to them at home. But other than that, Notre Dame has just been absolutely dominant. Now, look at their schedule. It's been pretty easy. Don't give me this, they've played so many ranked teams, yada, yada. Navy and Army, they're good teams. Did they deserve to be ranked when they were ranked and whatnot at that time? Because they were undefeated, yes. Are Army and Navy as good as most of the other ranked teams that Notre Dame could have played? Definitely not. I hate that Notre Dame fans will fall back on, we beat Army, we beat Navy. No. Sure, you did. I'm not arguing that you beat them. You should have beat them. You also should have beat Northern Illinois. Those wins are not as great as they make them out to be. But still finish the season with just 1 loss. You're playing for the national championship game. Kind of got to eat it here. Outstanding defense. Their defense has been great all season and has really shown up in these playoffs because, again, it was one of those things, such an easy schedule. Defense really hasn't been challenged. And so then you go play Indiana, who was a great offense all year, and you play Georgia, whose offense was you play Penn State, who's at times had a very explosive and interesting offense. And you played well every single game. So the defense has shown up, and they have proved that they are one of the top defenses in the country. They are 3rd in points allowed and 9th in total yards allowed. I mean, the stats themselves just tell you the story right there, but to actually see them go against good teams for once and actually do well just kind of reinforces that. When we look at their defense, the strength of their defense has definitely been their passing attack. Now, that could be one of those things where, again, you look at their schedule, haven't really faced anybody who scares you when it comes to throwing the ball. USC, sure. But USC threw for nearly 400 yards and like 3 touchdowns on Notre Dame. Now, I'm aware that they did USC through 2 pick-sixes and in that game, and so how can you say that they got torched against USC? You still let USC get all the way down to basically the goal line, and then he just 2 bad reads with a short field turn into a pick-six, but you still let them drive and you still let them get to that point and you still let them score like 35 points on you and throw for a lot of yards. So regardless of those 2 pick-sixes, which came in like the final 5 minutes of the game, you were getting torched up to that point to an extent. And maybe torched is the wrong word, but you weren't necessarily stopping USC. Like I said, 35 points, quite a few yards. They hadn't really been pushed. Louisville would be the other team I guess you could throw in there that had the best passing attack, but like their win against Texas A&M. Texas A&M likes to run the ball. Look at Navy and Army. They generally run the ball. Stanford doesn't scare you with their passing attack, neither does Virginia. It's just game after game, they played teams that just really didn't scare you throwing the ball. Georgia Tech, another team, does not scare you throwing the ball. And they didn't have Haynes King. It was one team after the other that just is not good at throwing the ball. And then all of a sudden you throw in that USC game and you're like, have they even really been tested? So far, you could argue Indiana has a good passing attack. Notre Dame did pretty good against them. Georgia's passing attack has been up and down. They didn't have Stetson Bennett. Hard to say in that one. Penn State had a good passing attack when it comes to their running backs and tight ends, and they found some success, but Notre Dame shut down those wide receivers. Absolutely shut them down, which Penn State's receivers are not great to begin with. Shut them down. So they have shown that they do have a good pass defense. It's not a fluke. One other thing they're really good at, forcing turnovers. Out of the 15 games that they have played so far, they have forced 2 or more turnovers in 10 of those games. So 2/3 of those games, they're forcing 2 or more turnovers. There's only been one game where they haven't forced a turnover. Coincidentally, that is their loss to Northern Illinois. So if you just don't turn the ball over against Notre Dame, you're going to win. If you lose the ball 2 or more times, you're probably going to lose, which is the case in most instances, but especially against Notre Dame, you're fucked. It is what it is. Now, offensively for Notre Dame, their rush attack has just been phenomenal. Jeremiah Love has been great. Leonard's been great. Even Price has been good. They're 10th in the nation in rush yards. Love and Leonard obviously leading that attack. But throwing the ball, definitely not as dominant. Now, also in their defense, with an easy schedule and having leads in a game, you don't really have to throw the ball. So them being 101st in passing yards, I think that's a little skewed just because of everything I just said. You're leading in games, you're not going to be throwing the ball a lot. You're just trying to run the ball and get out of there. So if you're up 3 touchdowns at half or in the third quarter, you're just going to start running it, waste that time, and not going to throw the ball, and that's going to skew those numbers a little bit. So while they have not been shown to be dominant, they actually haven't had to be. So before the playoffs, they really had not been in many games where they were forced to rely on their passing attacks. They just didn't have to. Now in the playoffs, their running game has started to get shut down a little bit, and we've seen Riley Leonard have to throw the ball more, and up until that Penn State game, it was questionable if he really was throwing the ball that well. But Indiana, he took like 30-plus attempts to get to 200 yards, like insane. I don't think he was necessarily great against Georgia, but against Penn State, he threw the ball well enough, and they were able to move the ball and ultimately win that game. Remains to be seen how that will go against Ohio State, but we'll get into that. Ohio State this year, 13-2. Lost to Oregon, who, was the number 1 team basically all year. Lost to Oregon by 1 at Oregon. And then they finished off the season with a 3-point loss to Michigan at home. Just such an ugly game. Wait, was it 3 or 6? Doesn't matter. They lost. It was 3. So they looked a little broken heading into the playoffs. And people were starting to kind of question a $20 million roster and you're losing to Michigan. It's one thing you lose to Oregon by 1 at Oregon. Fine, whatever. Get them back. You were driving late in that game anyways. But to lose by 3 to Michigan at home with that $20 million roster, started to have some question marks. Started to think maybe are they broken? You got some injuries on the offensive line. Maybe it's about to all time collapse. But then the playoffs started, and this is the Ohio State team we expected to see the whole year. Offensively, we all know they have weapons everywhere. We know about Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. If one of those guys isn't getting it going in the run game, the other one probably will. They got Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate. If Jeremiah Smith isn't going off, then Egbuka is. If Egbuka is not going off, then Carnell Tate is. It's just, if Carnell Tate isn't, then all of a sudden G. Scott has an underrated game. It's just one of those things where you think you have, you shut down the one guy and you're like, we got him. And then another guy just goes off and they're like, okay, we got to shut down both these guys. And you shut both of them down. Well, then they got a third guy who just goes off. And it's got to be so frustrating to play Ohio State when you know that at any point, any one of their top 4 receivers could go off. Any one of their 2 or 3 running backs could just go off. If you shut down one, you got to shut down the other, and then the other, and the other. It's just too many weapons, too much going on. And it's been impossible to stop them in this playoffs, pretty much. Texas did a pretty good job. Granted, they were like bracketing the shit out of Jeremiah Smith, not letting him beat them, so every other receiver came out on top. But they're averaging nearly 450 yards per game and 37 points per game in these 3 playoffs games. Overall this season, they're 17th in points scored, 35th in yards. Points scored 17th, that's pretty good. 35th in yards is not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. But a whole new team starting in the playoffs here. Jeremiah Smith, those first 2 rounds, unstoppable. Just nobody could guard him. It's almost like they forgot that they needed to guard him. It was insane. Texas was able to stifle him, like I said, but ultimately you could not contain everybody else. I think Tate, Egbuka, and Scott all finished with like 5 or more catches, and just Travion Henderson took over that game. It's just too many weapons. You can't stop it. Defensively, I think this is where the biggest turn on has come. Well, I guess I can't say that because they only scored like 10 against Michigan and have dropped 40 plus almost every game since. But that defensive line for Ohio State is dominant as hell. In 3 playoff games, they have 16 sacks and 28 tackles for loss. That's like 9 tackles for loss a game, and we're looking at, 5 sacks a game? That's insane. So it just goes to say that they're going to dominate Notre Dame's offensive line, more than likely. Defense as a whole, though, only allowing 17.3 or something like that points per game over the 3 games. And this season, they were first in points allowed and yards allowed. It's very few offenses have had any sort of success against Ohio State's defense. You could argue Oregon's probably had the most, success in the regular season, and look what they did in the playoffs. Michigan beat them 13-10. It's not like Michigan was having anything going on offense for them. This defense is so good, and I have a hard time. I don't know if Notre Dame's going to get to 20 points. And if they do, it's going to be just getting to that 20 points. They are not getting a point more, in my opinion. I guess I can't say that because that defense so far has been giving their offense great field position and scoring themselves. So who knows? I just have a hard time seeing that offense, I should say, scoring 20 points. And based on all that, yes, Notre Dame's had a good year. 14-1. It's been great. Granted, an easy schedule with a terrible loss to Northern Illinois. But Ohio State has just been so dominant, and they're finally clicking on all cylinders and looking like the team, like I said, that we expected them to look like the whole year. This game just gives me 2013 National Championship game vibes, and that's obviously I jumped to that one for 2 reasons, but that's the one that Bama beat down Notre Dame 42-14, and me comparing this one to that one, some may say is not fair to Notre Dame, and that I'm not being fair, and that this Notre Dame team is way better than that one, and they might be right. Maybe I'm not being fair, and I do believe that this Notre Dame team is better than that one. But the reason I feel like this is the 2013 National Championship game is based on 2 things. One, Obviously, Notre Dame is playing in this one, and they happen to play in that one as well. But two, Ohio State has just been that dominant that this feels like a Georgia TCU game, a Alabama Notre Dame game, a just absolute blowout in the national championship game. Alabama Ohio State a few years ago. Was that the national championship? That was the national championship. It's not going to be a good one. I'm going to watch the whole game because it's the final college football game of the year. I just don't know that it's going to be a good one. It gives me those 2013 vibes. It's just, when you run through both teams and you just look at who they've played, how they've played, it's hard not to be leaning this hard towards Ohio State to win this. Notre Dame's defense, they need to play lights out yet again, and I'm sure they're going to have some stops. Will Howard is not the greatest quarterback of all time. He's going to make some mistakes, miss a read, maybe throw the ball away, throw it to the other team, throw it to Notre Dame. Who knows? Something fucky might like that might happen. So they'll make some stops, but they need to be lights out. And offensively, Leonard needs to make something happen with his legs because, let's be honest, Ohio State, they're going to dominate that line of scrimmage, and they're going to shut down that run game. I don't know that Love, Price, Williams, any of them are going to have much luck. It's going to come down to Leonard. When he is under pressure throwing the ball, what can he do with his legs? Can he keep plays alive to find somebody open downfield? Can he catch Ohio State off guard with his legs, which I doubt that he will, and gain 5 yards instead of losing 5 yards? Can he do enough with his legs to keep them in this game? I'm sure to some extent, a drive here and there, he may keep the drive alive for another set of downs or something like that. But in the end, it is just not going to be enough. I think Ohio State wins this one easily. Like I said, I don't know that Notre Dame, at least their offense, can get more than 20 points. Unless, like I said, their defense puts them in good spots or scores for them. Notre Dame's not getting 20 points. A few bets I do like for this game. Ohio State, and they're all Ohio State. First drive touchdown, plus 230. This has hit in all 3 playoff games. Against Texas, scored on the very first drive of the first half, and then shot themselves in the foot and had penalties that ended drives, but didn't score until the final, the final minute of the first half. So didn't score a lot in that first half, but they will score on their first drive. I'm calling it in this one as well. They'll hit this in 4 straight. Ohio State team total over 27.5. They scored 28 against Texas, and I do think you could argue that Texas defense might be better than Notre Dame's. Tough to say. I might lean that Notre Dame's is a little better, but I don't know. This game might get out of hand where they might give up a little bit because this game is so out of hand. Ohio State hits 28. And then I've got Ohio State minus 8.5 at minus 105. Again, just based on how we've seen this Ohio State team play, Texas was the closest team, and it was a 14-point win. I don't think Notre Dame can score enough to keep it close enough to cover. Ohio State covers. Ohio State over their team total. Ohio State first drive touchdown. Ohio State wins. Ohio State, Ohio State, Ohio State. It's hard. I want to make an argument for Notre Dame, and I feel like I kind of did that, but it's just, if you've watched anything, you just have a hard time leaning Notre Dame in this one. But I thank y'all for joining me. That is my national championship preview. I don't expect it to be a good game, but I'm still excited for it nonetheless. And I will talk to you guys in a couple to recap.